Marketo user group. So to, Jake, is it not, the arrow's not working?
Sorry.
Just, is it because my mouse is in the wrong place? Sorry guys, technical issues.
This is also a touch screen if you want to.
But that works? Yeah, okay, cool.
Okay.
Sorry. Welcome everyone, in person and online. Just before we sort of kick off officially, just a really big thank you to the guys from Adobe and also the team from RMIT, without who we could not have put on this event today. So thanks to Adobe for the yummy food that we have in person. Sorry, everyone online, and RMIT for helping us with a venue for today. If anyone here does actually have a venue similar to this that they would be able to offer for any mug events in future, please do let myself, Cecilia, or Jay know. We would love to be able to chat to you. We rely on kind of sponsors and customers to run these events. So talk to us if you can help us out. So today's agenda, so I'll do a little bit of housekeeping, but I won't keep you for long. If you haven't met us before, I'm Helen. I'm one of your mug leaders, and we also have Jay and Cecilia. The three of us run the Melbourne Mugs. We sort of put on 3 to 4 events throughout the year. Welcome to connect with us on LinkedIn or reach out to us at any time if you have questions or if you want to be more involved with any of the mugs. Then we were going to have a presentation by Adele Munsey. Adele's presenting online today, so she's going to be talking to us about fixing rampant duplicate data in Marketo and Microsoft Dynamics. I'm sure that's something we can all relate to. Then we have JL, who is going to be presenting on improving your templates for better engagement. And then you'll be hearing from me again, talking a little bit about the Marketo REST API, but in very non-technical terms. Awesome. Just a quick note. So user group house rules. So just so that this is a safe space for all of our mug attendees, we do ask that everyone follows these rules. So no self-promotion or pitching of any kind at mug events. Please do not contact people outside of the user group without their consent. And for any of the presentations today, if people are sharing their use cases, please don't share them wider than this group without their consent. We usually will share the sort of slides around, but we'll make sure that we have people's permission before we do that. This session is being recorded online today, and we will upload that to the Mug user YouTube channel so that it can be accessed after the event. If you do not wish to participate, you can feel free to watch the recording at a later time. If you have any questions, you can reach out to advocacy@adobe.com. If you're not already signed up to our chapter, most of you will be because you signed up for this event, but please pass this link to any of your Marketo friends. Just look up mugs.marketo.com and find the Melbourne user group, and then you'll be getting all of our notifications about our next events. Quick one, upcoming opportunities for Mug members. Adobe Summit is coming up in 2025, and they are looking for speakers. So you can scan that QR code and you'll get a copy of this afterwards if you want to scan it later. But if that is something that would be interesting to you, feel free to submit. I'll leave that there for just a second, but as I said, you can always have a look at that afterwards. So that's it from me in terms of introductions. So give me a minute while we have to sort of change over speakers and microphones, and then I will pass over to Adele to share.
Hi everyone, let's get my presentation up. Okay, hoping you can all see that one. Just flick back. Yep, it's showing, great. All right, so hello, I'm the Marketing Automation Manager at Interactive. Interactive is a B2B organization. We sell IT managed services to other organizations like cloud, cybersecurity, and systems like data centers. And I've been with Interactive for about a year now. And since the start of Interactive, I've been working really closely alongside V because we've had some big data duplication issues to solve. And we also wanted to progress our Marketo maturity curve. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the duplicate issues that we've been experiencing, but I'm also going to talk to how we identified, raised the impact, and worked towards a solution within the business. It was not a simple process and required a lot of stakeholder management, internal and external resources to achieve the outcomes we wanted. So I'm hoping that by this presentation today, you can gain a bit of insight and learn a bit what I learnt about on this journey. So starting with the problem that we had at hand. So since its inception with Interactive, Marketo and its integration with Microsoft Dynamics created duplicate records. There were multiple scenarios that were contributing to the duplicate records, but it meant that we couldn't accurately look at lead, contact, or customer lifecycle. We then couldn't create nurture programs because we weren't sure who would go into the flows. We weren't able to create lists or segment. There's a lot of manual work involved, even with just setting up an email campaign. So it was impacting a lot of our marketing activities and our use of Marketo quite drastically. So upon our research into what the hell these duplicates were, basically, we found that there were 6 problems that we had to solve. So the first one was the biggest one, and that was every time a lead got converted into a contact in CRM, it was coming back into our instance as a duplicate record. So it was losing sight of that initial lead, and that's where about, I'd say 70% or maybe more of our duplicated records were coming from. We also work with CRM. CRM sees Marketo form submissions, which were our web inquiries, as inquiries and not people. So every new inquiry, although it would match with the existing record in Marketo, it would then go into CRM and come back as a duplicate. We also don't put every record that comes into Marketo into our CRM platform. We wait until they're a marketing qualified lead. So that meant that if that record was not visible in CRM, sales could go create them again, or a list import could happen, and they'd sync back to Marketo again as a duplicate. We had the issue of when a lead was disqualified in Dynamics, that we weren't able to reactivate it. So a new lead was created and the duplicate came into Marketo. And then we had a few process issues, which I'm sure we all experience, where even though there's a little warning to sales that someone might exist already, they go ahead and they create a duplicate anyway, which flows back into Marketo. So when I started, we knew a few things that we needed to do, which was, first of all, establish why, how, and where the duplicates were being created. Because the issue did not sit solely in Marketo and also was due to our integration with CRM, we needed to get some internal and external resources to help us solve the problem. And then it should be a pretty easy process from there, find a solution, we test and fix, and then we just merge all the existing duplicate records. But unfortunately, things are never that easy. What I found was we were kind of stuck on the how, which was preventing us from getting a solution. So we identified it was due to the sync, but we couldn't find where in that sync the duplicates were occurring for that first scenario. And then we had a little bit of an internal project team as well, but they weren't necessarily all the right people that we needed. And we're kind of going around in circles trying to get to the solution. And over, a series of a few months, even years, we were just never getting to that solution phase. So a lot of work had been done by the time I came into the company a year ago, and I realized that it was not a technical journey of solving this duplication issue. It was actually a business one, which I'll talk through. So a lot of what I had to do was networking, selling, engaging, and negotiating. So it took up so much of my time, more so than actually solving the duplication issue. I needed people to help me recognize, analyze, and solve the problem. So I was lucky because I had started I had a reason to go up to people in the organization and introduce myself and kind of make those and establish those relationships. So I made a real big effort with approaching our CRM and our tech teams, letting them know who I am and my role in the business, and then putting this issue at the forefront to try and get them on my side because I really needed their help. And then there was also a lot of networking with our ELT, because essentially they were the people that were going to give me the permission to take CRM and tech teams' time to help me solve the issue. So I had to do a lot of showing them the impact, keeping them updated with what I was trying to do, and how, if we resolve this, it would impact the business in a positive way. So with that came a lot of selling. I consistently had to advocate for Marketo's role within the business, because when you're talking to people maybe outside of marketing who don't know what an automation platform is, don't really know how the marketing team functions, if you say, oh, we've got a problem with Marketo, our automation platform, their simplest answer is, well, let's just get rid of Marketo then. The problem's in Marketo, let's get rid of it. We'll just use, the Dynamics out of the box marketing tool. So it was a lot of trying to educate people and inform people about the capabilities of the platform and what it could do for us once we solve this issue. I then had to make sure I was keeping people engaged. So between the networking and the researching about the problem and explaining what Marketo does, I had to keep us moving forward, but keep all those people I'd spoken to and I've got on board engaged with the project, keep it moving forward. So I really became the project manager of that, which took up quite a bit of time. And then on top of that, I'm negotiating the budget, because they got to a point where something needed to change. We weren't solving anything by trying to look at it internally. So we identified that we needed external support. And thanks to Bella, our account manager, she put us in contact with V. And what really worked there when we spoke with V is that I got our internal team involved in meeting with her. So I had a few key CRM people and ELT people in the meeting. And, within 10 minutes, you're speaking to someone like V who has a lot of experience and more knowledge about the platform and the integration than we do. And she kind of provided us a light at the end of the tunnel. And so because they were able to meet her and see firsthand that, hey, we're going to get to solving this issue much faster than where we've got to so far, it made it a lot easier to negotiate and for that budget, because I had multiple people's support behind me to get Veronica on board. So this is what we ended up doing. Lots of documentation. Each of those 6 scenarios had their own documents. We outlined the problem and potential solutions there too. What really got it across the line though was I had to simplify it. I think we started off using a lot of marketing or Marketo or CRM terminology, and that's assuming that everyone in the business knows what you're talking about, but with a large organization, that's not always the case. So everything had examples, and there were simple examples like showing how one person could have 3 records in Marketo, and they're each at a different life cycle, and how I can't determine, which one's the right one in order to email them. So that really helped, because once I simplified it and I put it into easy terms to understand, then I found I got some champions above me in ELT, because they could simply explain the issue we're experiencing to other people. That really helped me present my business case. So I had all the documentation ready to go. And then we campaigned for external budget, and don't know where my screen's gone. Let's try this again. We got V on board, and there was a lot of collaborating. So we did workshops with V, the marketing team, CRM, and the tech team as well, to not only identify the issue, but see the impact it could potentially have on other platforms. And in our case, nothing really in Marketo needed to change at the start. It was in CRM. So we really needed those workshops so that those teams were on the same page as the rest of us. Luckily, we were able to fix and test that initial problem. So the first one, where duplicates were created on the lead to contact conversion, we solved that. And then I kind of had to go back to step 1, because what we needed was another external consultant to help us clean up all that duplicated data. So we got JTF on board, but I had to go back to documenting negotiating budget and collaborating with the right people so I could get them on board to help us clean up our environment. And then watch this space, because the next bit, resolve, we're up to re-engaging the CRM team to fix the rest of the duplicate scenarios. And that actually leads perfectly onto the next slide, which is the hurdles that we've been facing along the way. So although that seemed very step by step, and once you got everyone on board, it should go smoothly, it's not always the case, especially when the project is taking some time. So what we had was team members left. So, well, the person in my role left and I inherited the problem. So I had to get myself up to speed. But then we also had a key person in CRM leave, and they were so integral to getting things done fast for us. We had sold them the dream. They were on board. They were ready to make the changes. And then once they left, we really found that it kind of dropped off a bit. We had to go back to catching up new team members on where we were at. And we found that this held us up quite a bit. Repetition back to, as I was spending the budget I'd been allocated, and because I was, yelling from the rooftops, help me fix this issue, I was raising Marketo's profile in the business. So there's lots and lots of demonstrating what Marketo is and what it does and how we use it, which is a great thing because, you have key stakeholders come to you and they want to learn more and they want to use the platform. It just means that, I wish they all came together at once and I did one big presentation, but it doesn't always work that way. So I have presented on Marketo many, many times. We've got it down to a T now. Momentum, as I said earlier, we solved that first duplication issue pretty quickly, which was very surprising. Once we got V on board, we identified it and we fixed it, which was great. Big win, a lot of our duplicate issues solved, but we still had more to go. But keeping the project team engaged has been a real challenge. They spent a fair bit of time on my problem. And for me, it's, I'm exposed to it every day. I see the impact it's having. It's so important to me. But the other project team members, especially in CRM, are getting pulled in so many different directions. And they feel like, okay, well, now I've got to spend a bit of time here. So it's been a real challenge to keep them engaged and ready to implement the next changes for us without having that key person that did things really quickly. We've kind of gone into having to submit tickets and things like that, which has held us up. And a lot of that, again, is because of business transformation. Again, it's taken a year and we're almost there, but over that time, we've had changes in CRM, leadership, and processes. And sometimes things like that, especially cleaning data in our CRM, which so many teams use, that becomes a priority and we've been held up. So there's some challenges that we're still overcoming, but it's good to know in hindsight. That actually talks to what would I do differently along the way. And that is the consistency. I'll jump to the last one with the project team. I think I thought I'm a bit of a burden because they're being so helpful. They're spending so much time helping you out to solve this issue. And they're busy and getting pulled in multiple directions. But simple things like having that fortnightly same time meeting with the team, even if you don't have much to update each other on, it's keeping it top of mind for everyone. So you don't have to start from scratch every time you want to resolve a new issue or a new person joins the team because you've already got those meetings in place. V said this to me yesterday. It's so true. Never assume anything is a quick and easy fix because if it is, fantastic, but it's most likely not. And I'm so guilty of being like, yeah, we can do that by next week. That'll happen this afternoon. But when there's so many key stakeholders involved and they're getting pulled in multiple directions, I think being more realistic about timeframes would have helped and really maybe helped us stick to rigid deadlines if we gave a bit more time for people to manage the project alongside us. And then another thing I'd do differently is that we found we had to have a new sandbox to test in, and we didn't find that out until like the middle of the project, which held us up and goes back to we lost a bit of momentum. So I wish I looked at having everything set up and ready to go before I looped in the project team. But again, that's just something you kind of look back in hindsight. But yeah, that's it from me. Any questions? I will stop sharing my screen because I can't see the chat.
Okay. Thanks, Adele. Just letting you know, I have to turn off the speaker and then turn on my microphone for in the room. So there might be a delay in between, but there is a question for you in the room.
Okay.
How do you manage when you're quite a way through the work and then you find brand new big problems? You know, you discover new issues as you're going through. How do you manage that?
New issues.
We can't hear you for 1 second.
I can.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good? Okay, I'll just put the speaker back on.
I'm assuming you mean like new issues that we're dealing with in Marketo. Okay, yeah. To be honest, that did happen, but it all kind of contributes to your ultimate goal, which is to get the platform up and running and get, the most reliable data, in our case, that you can. So I think going back to having documenting everything, you'll see that everything ties together, and having those consistent meetings with the project team, so that if something does pop up, it's not the end of the world. It's just kind of added to your project as a whole and another thing that you need to achieve. And more than likely, I found within Marketo that they all relate in some way anyway. And it's okay to go back and forth, and it's okay to take a few steps back if it means your outcome is going to be something that you never have to look at again, and a long-term fix. And I don't know if V's still there. I can't see her, but we've had a lot of setbacks along the way. But I think what's been really integral is that we're just constantly learning about the sync and the platform, and you can't let it get you down. You've just got to approach it the same way you approach everything else. I hope that answers your question.
I think that's the only question that we have in the room. So thank you, Adele. If there's any more as we go through, then I'll let you know later on. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
None from you?
No.
No. Cool. Thank you. We'll just reset screens. Give us a moment. And then share this one.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Awesome. Which screen is it? It's showing me nothing here.
Scroll that way.
Can you do it? But it's trying to share here. Yeah.
Oh. Wait. Put that into.
I promise I can
slideshow.
use a computer.
And then.
Just one, not one that's not mine.
Back to thing. Just need to go back to
All right.
moving.
Tap. You can tap.
And you need to be on this one.
Oh yeah, that's
Go
right.
back.
Right.
So
Go back to the yeah. This is not the first line?
No.
Oh yeah.
okay.
All right.
All good.
Over to JL.
All right, everyone. Hi. My name is Jean-Louis. I run a consultancy practice with some designers and developers and I've spent the past 15 years working in templates, but templates for marketing automation. And I like to underline that because there's a big difference between designing and coding something to just push live and designing a template which I then hand over to a marketing team, which is going to use it over and over again a few days. It's a totally different art. So today I'm going to cover some mainly challenges we have around emails, the designing of it, and how we can improve templates around some of the stats that exist. And I'll also touch on landing pages and forms. Usually, the concepts I'm going to talk about can be applied across those different assets. But the goal here today is to try and share some practical knowledge and insights, which I hope will give you some creative ideas to take on for your next template build projects. Okay. So the key learning from these stats here is that people in general have a short attention span when it comes to reading emails. So there's a limited time for impact, and the first impression and content placement is very, very important when it comes to email templates. So if I had to categorize the issues that get reported to me by clients, I do get a lot, and it's not only towards Marketo, right? I work on other platform also, but usually when there's a change, when you and your team have been using one platform for a while, trying to adapt to a new environment with new tools, and when you've been used to think in a certain way is a bit of a challenge. So there's a lot of issues around getting on board with a new platform. I get the complaint that, the templates is quite rigid, it's set up, I can't do things I want to do. There's issues when they try and send emails, because when you used to send emails in one platform for years and it just works, just starting with a new platform and trying to get it to work again and again, it might be a bit of a challenge. So a lot of these issues are not always related to the platform, but it's related to the way you prepare for that template build. So when you're building emails, if you get involved in building an email template project, there's a couple of things you need to be wary of and understand. And my suggestion is to try and simplify things as much as you can. There's 50 multiple email clients out there, so it's pretty much impossible to try and get some code which is going to work everywhere on any device on all the email clients, right? So the good place to start is to when you try and categorize emails, when starting to plan to review how your emails are performing in terms of deliverability, is to go first with desktop versus mobile. So looking at your web versus local OS. So are you categorizing your email clients as an email client which is open in a browser against a client which is open on a local operational system? This can make a lot of difference in the way the email is rendered. You've also got the mail servers also, which I'll put in there, but because of security issues, some mail servers will strip part of the code of your emails, and then you don't have any control about that. Being aware of that at the start will be helpful in terms of your brief and making sure that when you're testing, your template and your code has been optimized to look as best as it can across all these email clients. So when it comes to responsive support for email, there's two main categories, and there's the ones that support responsive design. So it reads the code, it reads all the styles that you put into style your layout for mobile, and you've got the non-responsive support. These ones, they'll do the same thing as the mail server. They strip the code, And then you can be, if you're not sure what you're doing, you can be in no man's land. And that's when you need to make a decision on how you want your template to display on these mobile email clients that don't support responsive layouts. There's been, I'm going to mention a quick one about the hybrid approach. There's been a new approach where with the idea of trying to build a fluid layout. That's when you resize the screen physically, everything starts stacking on top of each other, which should then work on the non-responsive supported clients. The issue here then is with the rendering. So as much as it resizes well and stacks well, but the rendering and the alignment of things, it can be a bit everywhere. So for me, if you want my own opinion, the best way to approach your mobile layouts is this way. So if you get the desktop layout there with 3 images and the list, this is a responsive layout where everything stacks as you want it to, and you can pretty much do whatever you want when on these email clients that support responsive layouts. And this one here is a way to go, with my opinion, my experience, is to just revert to the desktop layout on those email clients that don't support your responsive layout. And the reason for that is that it gives you nearly like 99.9% of control on how it's going to look on these mobiles. Because if you try and go the other way with the hybrid approach and that, you might end up with a few people raising issues on these email clients. So when building a template and briefing your developers, always ask for them to provide also a layout on how it will look on mobile clients, but do not support responsive layouts. So addressing the short attention span that I talked earlier, you want to try and make sure that the content and the placement, people can easily scan through the template and the email. And you want to make a good impression. And I'm going to use an old term here, telling my age and how when I started to do web design, but there's something that we call above the fold. So when the page loads or people open your email first without having to scroll is what we call above the fold. So this is prime real estate in email and landing page design. So making sure that you get that right is going to address head-on the 7-second attention span. Now, when we talk about scalability, I love to use that research from Nielsen Norman. We found out with the eye tracking test that our eyes tend to read screens in an F shape. So we go full horizontal movement and then a shorter one. And as we scroll down, we stay on the left mostly. And what it means is that from that, again, I'll go back to the staying on above the fold there. The top 350 pixels is prime real estate, as you can see on that image here, putting your important messages, largest text, and a first call to action there. Direct content in scannable chunks using gaps and little imageries or illustrations helps with that to have the eye, direct the eye nicely, not crowding a part of an email with too much content or copy. And also, obviously, when you go down, the further down you go, try. And you've got, everyone who uses an email template would have had some of these modules, the alternative modules. Try and use the ones with the buttons on the left. The more you go down, okay, and leave the nice images on the right to balance the content. With designing for engagement, it's also very important to know your audience and understand them, try and get a bit more information on things like age, industry trends, and their habits. What I love about this example here is nothing fancy, but they just know exactly who their audience are, how they love opening their emails on iPads, how they complain about tapping on buttons that don't work. So, and they just went through with a mix of fonts with serif and sans serif fonts, large buttons, clear, contrasting backgrounds, just to, because they know it works and they know that this is something which is going to profit them in the end, because a lot of the clients I talk to don't go deep into understanding, their market. And for instance, there's a whole discussion about going on dark mode, and the younger markets, how they love having their dark modes on. It's something which is quite interesting and important to know when you're planning your template. So how do we apply this? So I'm going to just share a few examples. Some of them you might know, but some examples of how you could improve your template to implement some of these concepts we've talked about. The first one is, you've seen it, adding the dynamic, using your tokens, having them in your pre-header text. It's something you can't do by default using the pre-header tool, but setting up your a global variable, you are able to then use tokens and make a bit more engaging pre-header text. So that when people open that app, have a little snippet of a message, you can already start engaging with them with something which is a bit more personalized. This is one of my favorite ones because I get a lot of questions. I try to tell clients not to use text overlay with background image on emails, because there's so poor support on that. Even if you try and code it properly, you can't really control how that background image is going to resize on different clients. And so one module and one feature which can help with that is to have those two image modules. So scrap that, just use the image. And in this setup here, you've got two images, one which will show on desktop and one on mobile. And the great thing with that is that you can then readjust the size. You have total control on how you want the elements to be placed on mobile. It's not going to be based on how that client is going to resize the background image in relation to the text. None of that. You got this. You can even review the height of the image to minimize scrolling and things like that. So having a feature like that where you can have a mobile or desktop image is quite good. Now, this one is another concept I like to tell clients that you don't necessarily have to show everything you display on desktop on your mobile version. Okay. Some things might make sense to show and have, to fill up space, but on desktop. But here you've got the possibility to hide some sections, some content sections, like here the heading and the image when you switch to mobile. And these are little features you can add on the side there to try and also developers, and based on reports from your campaigns, you can find that some modules might benefit from having less content being displayed on mobile. This one, the main features here allows for control on spacing. That's also something that a lot of people tend to overlook. We want it to look nice on desktop. We were talking about scanning earlier. Using gaps usually in design helps the eye to pose naturally when it flows. So it might make sense to have a well laid out module on desktop with spaces. But then when you switch to mobile, you want to limit the scrolling again, and you can do that if you've got features to adjust the spacing on mobile only and control it fully. And the good thing with that is that then it makes also the module being independent. You can add it in combination with other modules, and you've got full control on the spacing on both layouts. I couldn't talk about email templates without talking about buttons. That's the main challenge. Who hasn't gone through a challenge of trying to edit the call to action or the link and then seeing the purple underline text or the style, losing the style, the button stopping to work? The challenge of buttons with Outlook. for B2B communications. So there's a gentleman called Stig who a few years ago came up with a new way of coding buttons using a language called VML, vector markup language, pretty much like vectors in design, which you can rescale without saturating the image. But this one is in code, and he found a way to make sure, he called it bulletproof buttons, make sure that it looks nicely good on Outlook and other email clients. And when you use this type of code, then it's quite overwhelming. So just adding it as a normal module there to update the text would it be for the beginners? You need to know your HTML to update that. So for this reason, the best way to set up your bulletproof button, and you might already have them, is to have them as the variables on the side there. Okay. But when you get to variables, there's a little challenge, is that you can't make things dynamic. So using a tool like this one, where you can create your dynamic buttons and just copy and paste the code, allows you to use bulletproof button dynamically and then use segmentation. Imagine having an email but wanting to provide different call to actions to different segments. Tools like that might help you with your campaigns or your requirements, and mainly around buttons, making sure they look good everywhere on different platforms. So before wrapping up, I just want to quickly touch on landing pages and forms. The stats here, they reiterate that there's an importance here. You need to prioritize addressing this attention gap, which is why, again, you're encouraged to stay above the fold. And this explains why, if you go and look on blogs online and reports online, you'll find that the layout, the best performing layouts for landing pages for the past 10, 11 years hasn't changed much. That's because the basic keeping things simple still work there, and just keeping it to the top of the page still performs much better. So just wanted to clear up a few how would I say, confusion about landing pages and emails. I don't know if you've done that before. I do get clients coming to me and saying, okay, I want a new landing page template, but I want the same header from the website to be used on that landing page. And then starts a long conversation in trying to explain to them that you've got two different tools there. One is for exploring, so knowing more about your product and having a deeper content hierarchy to go and access content through 2 or 3 clicks, having multiple pathways to get to the information you want to get. That's your website. But the landing page should just be as simple as possible. It's there to convert, to drive a conversion, and you want to be able to do that in 1 or 2 clicks, right? So usually it's important if you're involved in a landing page project, not to try and say, okay, we need to be on brand and we just need to replicate exactly the same super comprehensive menu that we've got on the landing page with a sitemap. It can help in certain instances, but generally speaking, for landing pages, you just want to keep it simple, not much happening at the top there around the header. So I'm just going to use that as a little note to my ex-mentor. We were meant to present at the Marketo event in Las Vegas, but then COVID happened. And we're going to talk about Marketo forms and just talk about using Marketo forms a different way. And I like to use that word. It's a well-known quote from the original season of Star Trek, when they say it's life, Jim, but not as you know it. So when it comes to Marketo forms, I like to encourage people, and web forms in general, I like to encourage people to try and see them differently, not as a boring, checkboxes and radio buttons, what we see every day. So here are a few features you could try and add, and I hope it will give you some ideas to your Marketo forms and make it even more powerful. Here we've just integrated the Google Maps API to allow for a pre-fill, so while tapping your address. And the good thing with that is that you can also then in the backend deconstruct the address and fill up all of the fields. So in terms of UX for someone to just start typing and finding his address right away, it's a very good experience to have. So you could do that with a Google Maps integration. In this one, we've modernized the layout. So this is a preference center. We're using field sets in the Marketo form and applying some custom script and styling to just allow people to get a much better experience. Mainly with forms which are quite overwhelming at times, to just be able to collapse and expand and have a just more better visual experience is something you can do, and this is possible with a current Marketo setup. This one here, we use it for a client to not only create a multi-step form using field sets, but also creating a lead qualification tool, which would then send people to a personalized report once they submit the form. And on the other hand, it also sends the information to the team. So being able to, again, to qualify the leads. If it didn't make sense for the sales team to call them, they would send them to redirect them to the right resources online. But if they qualify for a sales call, the good thing that the salesperson also had all the information and all the answers from the report there before the call. And that's just using Marketo form again and applying some script to turn it into a multi-step form and being a bit creative in how you want to get people engaged using a bit of gamification. Now, as I'm going to share this, letting this video play with some of the cool things you can do in the current editors and with forms, I'm just going to share a few tips that hopefully you can take for your next template build project. So firstly, always adopt a content-first approach. Your current content is what should dictate how your template is going to be built. Content comes first. You know what type of content you send day in, day out. So let's, engaging on a new project, use this content to drive the design process so that you're given the best optimized layout for this type of content. Have a say in your editing experience. That's something that clients don't do enough. You get a new template, you have the right to tell your developer, I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to edit this module that way. I want to be able to turn off that button. So have a chat with them. Then it opens a whole new angle of how you could set up your template in a way that works for you. You don't get all these issues I've talked to you about earlier about, the new platform not working as we're expecting it to. I also like to encourage about two-phase testing. Always before, the problem is that sometimes templates get done, created, set up for you, and then it's time to hand over. The agency has used the time they need to use, and you don't get time to test properly. So use it two-phase testing. The first phase, just concentrate on all of the editing features. Make sure you're comfortable with it. Make sure that when you put in content, nothing breaks and it's working as you expect. And then you start doing the deliverability testing on all the mobile devices. Get trained early because one of the things that developers don't do sometimes is that they give you the template and you don't know what you meant to test. You don't have a checklist and what are the features. By getting them to train you, it will give you a bit more ammo for you to test the template better. And finally, choose an expert. I'm not talking about me, but in general, make sure you do your groundwork. Get a developer who understands the platform. And I've seen a lot of things that people are going through so much headaches before because of the templates were not optimized for the platform. So make sure you get someone who understands the platform and will be able to answer your question properly and take the time to look into your requirements. So thank you very much. And if you'd like to have a chat, I can talk and have a little free template health check. I'm more than happy to help you if it is of any interest to you. But yeah, thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Any questions from the chat?
No questions.
Any questions today?
I have questions, but I don't know, I'm probably the only one that cares about these.
Sorry.
That's right. Someone behind you's got a question. Keep going.
So my background is, I guess, that I spent pretty much all of last year working with the Marketo developers on developing a new template as per our UX team's design for like what the components should look like. I never want to do that ever again. I will literally quit if I ever have to do it again. There's still some problems with the template. So a lot of this really spoke to me because even engaging with Marketo, Adobe consulting Marketo developers, that we still have issues where we'll find, sorry about you guys, you all know this, like the buttons, you can't switch off the token. So a whole heap of links won't work. Like, I was like, they never even mentioned this to me. Like, I didn't quite realize that, on some bits until we went live and things like that. So it was very annoying.
All right.
But so with some of these things, especially when you're talking about the VML buttons, what is that VML thing? Because we have, in our template, we did try implementing some scripting where if it said if it's Microsoft, then it codes in this way. If it's not Microsoft, then do it in this way.
Yeah.
But with that coding, we had to go back on it to say, well, Microsoft is this go look shit, which means it looks kind of crap to all the internal stakeholders. It's just a red box. Because then it didn't we couldn't dynamically expand
and all that.
the
Yes.
size of the button based on the text. You would have to manually say, I want it to be this many pixels wide, which I might think is fine for me coming from a web background, but it's not okay for 99% of people actually having to use the button like this.
I see. Because it goes over 2 lines and all that. Right.
Yeah.
Context as well, we have 75 users.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, that's enough to
But
to
five of
manage.
them are admins that don't really send emails, so it's fine. It's only 70, it's fine. Not many.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with the VML thing, you have a builder online, a free builder online, which unfortunately is an older version of that VML. It's been improved over the years, and but yes, you have to be, as I say, very, very mindful there, because there's a lot of code. There's pretty much what's happening at the back. When the code is loaded, there's 2 versions of the button at the back. So there's actually 2 call to actions and 2 URLs. So you have to make sure that it's updated once when you do that. Now, with as you say, the issue there is usually on these older or less performing email clients, we call them.
Microsoft.
They like things to be specified. They like the specific width and specific, so that makes it a challenge to have expandable buttons at times. But there are solutions out there, and sometimes you might have to do a bit of compromise on, again, if you're going with rounded buttons and things like that, you're a bit more limited on what you can do. But if you still want to use that VML but with squared buttons, but still want them to look like pixel perfect, you can do much more, much more creative.
It's just that our buttons are square, but our design actually has like curvy edges. So it looks great in Gmail, and there's a big red square that is
in
not
Outlook.
our design in
I see.
Outlook.
Yes, come on, one.
The other question I had was, like with the banners, you're saying about having like text, an image with the text, but with our And I've had this discussion internally many, many times that I'm at loggerheads with anyone that has a design background. Is I say like, no, we have to have an image and you have to have it as a text overlay, because our usability team says that it needs to be text and needs to be a H1 to be usable, especially as a university. We need to have usability and accessibility as front of mind more than design.
Yes, and that. So the example I shared there is for the. So I've worked with clients before where people have very strong opinion on the design of how it should look, and when believe it or not, some of them they just don't care about how it look or anything. They just they know that the clients are just going to open the email on mobile, so they are more than happy to have this type of features, and it makes life so much simpler. And because usually, as you would know, I'm usually the bearer of bad news with designers, right? Where we've got this super sophisticated, beautiful design, and I say, well, I'm not sure we will be able to do that this way. We have to change things a little. So when you have modules like that one, it does help. But yes, otherwise, so there is a similar option for in VML for background images also, where it looks pretty much the same. Again, there's a bit of rigidity with the height, but you should be able to use it nicely on Outlook. And as I said, the main challenge there is when you get to mobile and trying to get this image, part of the image, to just replace, position itself nicely with the text. That's the only issue.
And it is not a question.
Yes.
Your point about the landing pages and not needing to have the full navigation and all the bells and whistles of the whole site on it was very interesting to me. That is probably a point I'm going to maybe just mention internally as a point of interest. Yeah, that was a very eye-opening thing.
But it's normal, you're right. But it's a genuine request for us from clients, because you want, you're in charge of this project, and you want your project to be on brand. You want the template to be on brand. So the first thing you do, you go to a website, you look at how things are displayed, and if it works and you like them, you say, yeah, let's try and replicate that, and that's it. And then people will still feel. Sorry.
It's the same template, the same header and the same footer, and just different content in it.
Yeah.
And,
right.
Yeah, but it adds really interesting for me. Really interesting.
Thank you.
It's like,
Another question?
Yep, I do have one. So JL, you briefly mentioned dark mode, which is growing trends, email marketing, and I also understand a big headache for you and for developers.
Yeah.
So just
No more hair.
thoughts.
That's why.
I just wanted to get your thoughts on how do you tackle that nowadays when creating templates.
I want to repeat the question for people online too.
Yes, I can. So I just had a question asking about how I would tackle any challenges around the dark mode for email. So I'll go back to what I said earlier about responsive design. You must go and try to simplify it. So there's three types of support when it comes to dark mode, and believe it or not, it's still quite a new thing. Although it's been around for a few years, it's still considered quite a new technology, and it's not well supported, unfortunately. So you've got the email clients which will support it fully. So with your style, whatever you tell it to do in dark mode, beautiful. It will obey, will do everything nicely. Then you've got the ones which will go in the middle way. Yes, we'll use a bit of your code, but we'll ignore the rest. And then you've got the ones that don't do it. They'll do it their way. And for that reason, I think the main challenge there is for companies and brands which have a wide color palette for their communications. Because the trick here is that when the client reads it, it looks at the darker and lighter shades. And if you have too many varying shades, it can be a bit of an issue usually. So I would say usually to my advice usually to this type of brands is to try and review your how would I say, your guidelines, your brand guidelines, or your digital brand guidelines, to go with a different color palette for digital communication. So going with bright colors and dark ones, colors where you have contrast, so that when the readers in dark mode see that, they can easily recognize the areas of contrast and make the changes accordingly. And this will reduce, believe it or not, the amount of issues enormously. But again, it's all a matter of knowing how to group your email clients and then testing on these ones. Thank you. So, yeah.
It's lovely to see you in person. It's been a while. I just wanted to say I really loved seeing some of the interactive elements that you used in the emails there, and I wondered if you could talk to whether that was just using GIFs or whether there was any other kind of magic that you added to.
All right. Yes. So it's a good point, and
I want to also repeat.
sorry. Yes. So I had a question here about the slide about the interactive elements on the emails, and if there's any sort of witchcraft behind that, or how it was created. So one of the first things I tell clients when we start an email project is email templates has a lot to do with the art of illusion. So yes, it was a GIF image, but trying to save that image and so that it loads faster, optimize it to load faster, and what is the trick, and without losing the resolution. You also got the same thing to do with, you get people asking me about carousels in emails, like collapsible modules. And I've seen a video, I'll tell you, I saw the video. I can tell you it's a video, it's not. It's a GIF, but it's a clever way of making it look like, feel like, even when you touch it. But, it was a GIF. But again, there's a few nice ways of doing that. And funnily enough, when people see that and receive emails from your streaming companies and what you say, it's a cool email. I hope, I wish I could do that in Marketo. But the truth is, you can probably do the same and replicate that in Marketo. That's why I wanted to show it there. Just for normal email 2.0 and doing these things, it's doable. It's just about setting it properly and knowing what you want first, so that then you can try and work on the right setup for you and making sure that it's easy for you to update it afterwards.
Well, actually, I have a follow-up question. So,
Yes.
I'm being briefly.
No, but
You know how I think it's next year that there's going to be an update to the email editor.
Yeah.
There's a new busy week or something that's being introduced.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to have any impact on the templates at all?
Well, my understanding, I've not had a chance to play with it yet, but my understanding, talking to the product team a couple of months ago, is that it would be a standalone, so it would be a new editor, and you have a new type of template for that. So, and you'll be given enough time, and it's the third generation of email editor in Marketo that I'm overlooking, and they're usually very good, pretty good, letting you a good amount of time to really warm up to the new editor, and so you'll be able to keep on doing what you are doing and have that new editor will not affect the current template yet until the time where they want to combine everything. But it's looking really very interesting. Some of the features I saw a demo last time, and I just could see it addressing a lot of the questions that clients had before, the requests that clients had before. So it's looking quite promising.
Actually, online has a similar question. So Aaron has asked, have you used the new email builder? Are you as scared as the rest of us?
Well, again, it comes like what I thought about change and all that. So, guys, at the end of the day, this is Adobe, right? We know their products. I've used Adobe products for a while, not before even the board Marketo, right? They're pretty good at listening to the client and giving you the best UX possible and features possible. Yes, there's going to be some pros and cons as everything, but in general, if you engage with the right partners, I don't see why there should be a massive issue. On the contrary, like you said, it would be better better in terms of adopting the platform and getting everyone on board of the team, because the features that I saw were just to the next level and at the same par as all the best editors you see currently online. Right.
Thank you.
Good. All right. Sorry. Hi. How are you? Yes.
How often would you recommend updating email templates?
17.
Yeah. All right. So
Okay.
yes, so it used to be around 3 years, but now the technology is moving so fast. And as I said, there's been iterations with dark mode, for instance, and dark mode support so much that templates need to be updated a bit more often. And so usually what you could do is work as a version-wise, have a sort of version control with your developer and have your template delivered version 1.0. Let's have a meeting in 3 months' time and see how it's going and what are the issues we're experiencing, and and what are the little upgrades or enhancements that we can make. It's more like continuous improvement, could help in the long term. But then in general, 3 years is more. And nowadays, 2 years max usually in terms of refresh and all that, because you need to also consider one thing, that we get bombarded with emails from cool companies, streaming companies. We see cool stuff happening every day. So unconsciously, we're being exposed to best practice UI and UXs. So it makes sense to review your template at least every 2 years. 2 years would be a cut-off point, I'd say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale.
Thank you.
All right. We're just going to a very quick 2-minute break, give everyone in the room a chance to stretch their legs. So if you're online, just bear with us for a couple of minutes, and then I will breeze through my presentation. All right, we're back. Hopefully those online are still with us. Cool. So today I'm going to be talking about the Marketo REST API and very much in non-technical terms. I think people get a little bit scared to kind of try and understand it or talk about it, but it's really not that scary, and we leave the scary things to the developers and the people who are very technical. I'm going a bit old school with my paper notes today, but I didn't want to be sort of staring at the screen. So sorry if you guys are hear paper rustling online. Why not clicked on here? Here we go. So just a quick poll, hands up in the room, thumbs up in the chat. So who here has some sort of automated data feed going into their Marketo instance? I know there's people in the room that do. Cool. So who has no idea how it actually works and just accepts that it happens sort of magically? Yeah, cool, we're all there. Who maybe wants a little bit more out of that integration that they already have? They would love more data. Yeah, cool. So lots of people all putting their hands up. I don't know if anyone's
People online as well.
People online, awesome. Cool. So, quick disclaimer before we kind of move on. I am not a developer, I'm not a coder, I'm not a programmer, and I don't really have any IT sort of qualifications. But, you know, I can architect solutions and integrations with Marketo and have really meaningful conversations with developers and the tech teams that do implement these. This presentation is really designed to give people who are Marketo admins and power users tools to better understand what is going on in their instance or what could be going on if you don't already have something set up, and to, I guess, empower you to ask your IT people, your tech team, your developers the right questions if you do want to get more out of your integration. So let's get into it. Something's going on with my notes here. I will be talking about the REST API specifically. I guess what I've been talking about will sort of refer to a direct custom-built integration, but it is really still relevant to anyone who might have like the native CRM integration or has any launch point integrations. It'll help you kind of understand what those tools are doing, even if you're not building a custom integration. So, what on earth is it? API stands for Application Programming Interface. You don't really need to remember that. People will probably know what you're talking about if you're talking to developers, but it's essentially a set of definitions, protocols for integrating application software. There are different types, but I'm going to focus on what's called the REST API today. What is that, do you ask? REST is short for Representational State Transfer, and I had to Google that for this presentation, so you also don't necessarily need to remember that.
These are MCE questions.
Well, I have an MCSA. They didn't ask me what that stands for. Okay, well, I didn't have that question in my exam. But it's basically a set of guidelines that the API has to follow. So that's why you'll sort of see different types, REST API, SOAP API. That's really what it's talking about. The REST API can automate many of the things that you already do day in, day out in the Marketo UI. You can create programs using it. You can create email templates, emails themselves. You can update tokens, add people to lists, and of course, probably mostly people are just using it to upload person data into their Marketo instance. Broadly, there are sort of two categories of things that you can do, and they sort of fall under lead database, which is the interaction with person records or associated objects, and assets. So allowing you to interact with your assets, so landing pages, forms, programs, smart campaigns, etc. So I'll have a look at a few of these examples today. To send an API request to Marketo, you have to have access. So same as you would to access your own Marketo instance, you need a login. So for API access into Marketo, you create a role, create a user, and then you create a web service in Marketo that generates those login credentials. I have linked to some documentation in this presentation later if you need to set that up or if you need to do that in future. But in a nutshell, you need to ask Marketo for something or tell it to do something, and your integration user with those access details is what's creating that request, sending it to Marketo using its credentials, and then you get a response saying that was successful or no, that went wrong. So that's sort of it in simple kind of terms. A little bit of a sort of deep dive into a few of these examples. So first, I'm going to talk about the bulk import. So this is one of the most common endpoints that I see people using. Now, I'm going to talk about endpoints a few times today. So an endpoint is basically the point at which the API connects with the software. So there will be different endpoints that you will use depending on what the action is that you need to take. So different ones for lead imports, different ones for assets, programs, all of those sorts of things. So what is the bulk import? It's basically, I just like to think of it as a big old list import into Marketo, and in reality, that is sort of all it is. It's a lot more for developers and the people actually coding the integration, but as someone who is just the Marketo Power user, that's the easiest way to think about it. How does it work? Someone in your tech team, your CRM team, will basically be generating a list of records based on certain parameters. Where they get that information on will come down to, your business. But for example, they might be looking for all active customers and looking for a specific set of fields or data that you need to import into Marketo, and those become the column headers of your file that you want to import, and that's what maps to the fields that you have in Marketo. I've got a bit of a sort of image here on the screen. In the documents, the Marketo API documents, they've actually got this, it's quite new. They've got this thing where you can actually test out some of the different endpoints. So I thought the visual was maybe a little bit helpful. But really what you're doing, you need to target your Marketo instance. So in your Marketo instance under web services, you will find your API, REST API endpoint. It'll be your munchkin string.marketorest.com/rest. So that's where you're going to be targeting. And the rest of the URL that makes up that request is sort of the endpoints that you're using. So you can see down here for bulk, the rest of the URL becomes /bulk/v1 So that's the endpoint for the bulk lead. And that'll look different depending on what it is you're requesting or sending to Marketo. So that's what you'll be targeting. That one at the top there is just one for testing. Then you'll be sending the body of the request. So for this particular one, it'll be basically sending a file into Marketo, but you can also add additional parameters to tell Marketo what it is you want it to do. So for a bulk import, you do have to specify the file type, and then that adds to the end of the query, the request that you're making to Marketo. So you can see at the bottom here, format equals CSV. And there's optional things that you can do as well, such as specify the lookup field, which I am going to talk about a little bit more today. But the lookup field is how do you want to match records in Marketo? So is that email address? Is it a customer ID? If you don't specify, it will default to email address. If you're using workspaces and partitions, you can also tell Marketo which partition you want to send the data into. And with a bulk import as well, you can also use an ID of a list, a static list that you already have in Marketo to send those leads directly into that list instead of just updating the database. So a few things that I guess are important to know. Sorry, I haven't gone through when or why would you use it. So common use cases if you're needing to import a really large data set into, such as your entire database, into Marketo, either as a once-off or on sort of a semi-regular basis, so sort of daily, weekly, monthly. And you wouldn't be using this when you need sort of real-time updates into Marketo. It's really for really large data sets. If you already have an integration, you're not exactly sure how it's working, but if it is going sort of daily, weekly, this is probably what you're using. Some important things to know, as I mentioned, by default, records will match on email address if you don't specify what you want Marketo to do. Typically, people would use sort of a unique ID like customer ID, and this would mean that you could then update your purposeful duplicate. So I think there's probably a few financial services people in the room who will have customers that share email addresses. It's a very common use case. So in that scenario, you're probably going to want to use something different to match your records when you're when you're sending data into Marketo through the API. With bulk import, something important to remember, especially if you're planning an integration with your developers or with an external partner, if you want to use bulk import, upsert is the only action that you can take. That means that it will either update an existing record or create a new record. So if you upload a list into Marketo, if it can match the email address, it will just update all of the other fields. And if it can't match it, creates your brand new record. So that's pretty much what that means. You can't actually make a choice to only create or only update records with the bulk import. I know people probably will have come across that issue before. Cool. All right, let's have a look at a couple of other examples. So sync lead is another very common endpoint that I see people using with Marketo. It's not quite a list import, but for non-technical people, I guess it's similar in that you are giving Marketo one or more records to update and specifying what fields you want to update in that API call. So you'd use this to update probably a much smaller subset of a smaller set of fields that you might want to import into Marketo, or a smaller set of data, or when you're wanting to have close to sort of a real-time sync for your records in Marketo. So for example, you might want to send, if you're using this and wanting to sync records every 5 minutes, you'd be looking for find me anyone who has been updated in the past 5 minutes and only send those ones to Marketo. So it's not for kind of going find my whole database and everyone who's been updated. It's kind of, for more real-time updates in Marketo. So your tech team, if you've got something like this implemented or you're looking to implement something like this, would set up a process that only pulls those records since the last sync, and then send the API request to sort of update or create those new records. Similar, you have to target your Marketo instance and you have to get your endpoint right. But the body of the request, we're not kind of using big files. It's more of a JSON string. So the body of the request is going to contain all of that information about the records that you want to pass through. You don't have to be able to understand this code necessarily on the screen, but it would kind of be like, member 1, here's the fields, and then there'll be a next section for member 2, here's the fields that I want to update, and that's what you're passing into Marketo. That request would also contain things that we were talking about on the last slide, so the lookup field that you want to use, that will default again to email address. If you don't specify, you can insert to a specific partition as well. But what you can do differently with the sync lead is you can actually choose the operation that you want. So you can create only, update only, create or update, which is the same as bulk, and you can even create duplicates on purpose. I don't know anyone, anyone know anyone who's used that or has that as a use case? I would love to hear about it if you do. Cool. And also actually, sorry, just to mention, in terms of choosing the operation, if you don't specify it's not required, it will default to create or update. So that's sort of the standard for that one. All right, I'm just gonna have some water. Activity extracts. So I probably don't have enough time to really explain all of the ins and outs of extracting activity data from Marketo, but I'm going to do my best to kind of give a decent overview. As you know, Marketo is storing a significant amount of activity data for each person in the activity log. So each activity type that you have in Marketo actually has a special unique ID. So a change data value, a visit web page, click link. There's actually a unique ID for each of those types in Marketo. And obviously, you'll see this in your activity log. Each entry has its own unique identifier as well, and date stamps and things like that. These IDs are how we actually ask Marketo for the information that we need. So I need to be able to say to Marketo, I want these types of activities for this sort of time frame, and that's why those things are really important. Like leads, activities can be extracted in bulk or in sort of a more, more frequently, or in sort of smaller sets. So there's a bulk activity extract endpoint, and there's also one called get lead activities and get lead changes that are kind of used for sort of smaller volume. You would use the bulk extract if you are looking to transfer really, really large volumes of data back into your data warehouse. Maybe you'd be extracting that on a daily basis to pull in for reporting or dashboarding if you don't have that capability in your CRM or whatever other tools that you're using. And then the other endpoints you would use for sort of smaller volume, maybe you need to pass more real-time updates back to your CRM. If you're someone that uses sort of the Salesforce or Dynamics native sync, you've probably got Marketo Sales Insights, which will be having that sort of activity that you can see in MSI. But if you don't have that, if you have a custom CRM, I have seen customers extract certain activities, such as sent an email through the API and actually pass that into their custom CRM so that frontline staff can kind of go, I know that this email went out and what it was called. You might not be able to see exactly what that email looked like, but if that is a use case, it can be really helpful for those sorts of things. Once you've decided, or you've kind of figured out what activity information that you need from Marketo, you'll actually need to first request those activity type IDs that I mentioned first. They're not the same for all Marketo instances. They can be different per instance. So like a change data value activity type could be like 2 in someone else's instance, and it could be 5 in someone else's instance. So there's documentation, the developers will know what to do. It's okay. But they will have to request those first, and it'll kind of give you information of all the different activity types you have in your Marketo instance and the different sort of pieces of information that you can extract. Once you have this, you can then sort of build your request to extract certain activity types from Marketo that happens during a certain time frame. So you might request, all form fill activities from the past 1 day, or if you were doing like a bulk extract, you might be requesting from Marketo that I want to know all form fills, email sends, emails delivered, opens, clicks, visited web page since the extract that I did the day before. You can then pull this information, as I said, into your data warehouse for reporting, pass it back to your CRM, just give it to your BI team to make you really beautiful dashboards or whatever it is that they need to do with it. There might also be some fields that you only have in Marketo that you actually need to extract and pass back to other systems. You can actually request change data value activity and specify what columns, so what fields you want to pull out. A really common example is the unsubscribe field. So if Marketo is a source of truth and that is not, you haven't got a two-way sync between your CRM, you can request those changes through the bulk activity extract and do with that whatever you need to. So I'm whacking the table here in your other platforms. Something to note, I guess, with the change data value information for non-bulk activity extracts. So if you're not using the bulk, it actually has its own endpoint. So I've got on the screen here, get lead activities and get lead changes. So when you're not using bulk, if you were looking specifically for data value, there is actually a different endpoint that you need to use. But yeah, it's all well documented. It's just you can't get as much information out of that one. So when you're kind of getting that more one-to-one data, it's a different endpoint that you would need to use. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of ins and outs of activity extracts and lots of different things that you can do. But really, my main takeaway is that you need to really think about what you need from your Marketo instance. If you just said to your tech team or your developer or whoever might be building an integration, I want everything. I don't know what I need. Just give me everything. That's going to be impossible. Like, you've seen activity logs in Marketo. If you actually tried to even extract all of that, they'd be like, no, it's too much, the system has crashed. So really think about what it is that will be essential. Think about it carefully and then sort of approach this if you don't have this already happening. Document the activities that are going to be meaningful and why you need them and what you're going to do with that information. So I see lots of people saying, oh yeah, we extract this information, but we're not doing anything with it. So if you don't need it, then don't extract it. But if you are extracting it, what can you be doing with it? Can you match that back to your other data in your data warehouse? Can you kind of close the loop on your sales process because you don't have a two-way sync between your Marketo instance and your CRM? It's really important to think about the why if you're going to look at extracting this information. And if you do have this already happening and you know that there's activity data coming out of your Marketo instance, find out what's coming out. Find out what people are extracting and see if you can kind of figure out a way to use it or do something a little bit different if it's not giving you what you need. A few more examples that I'll sort of touch on in a little bit less detail, but as I said earlier, if you can do it in the UI, you can probably do it with the API. So you could create and update custom object records. So there's a bulk custom object import. There's a sync custom object endpoint as well. So, if you have customers with multiple products, memberships, and you're not currently able to store those separately against the one record in Marketo in that one-to-many relationship, that is something that you could certainly look into. You can update program member statuses through the API. So if you're using an event integration, that's kind of what it's doing. There's an endpoint and it's sending that information into Marketo to change them to attended afterwards. If you don't have one of those sort of launch point integrations, it's something that you could certainly do. You can extract records that have been added to a static list in Marketo and then even remove them from it afterwards. I actually see a lot of integrations that work where in Marketo, you've got your triggers for if data value changes for this field, this field, this field, add them to list. And then with the API, you could simply make a request to go, give me all of those people from that list and all of these fields. And once you've gotten that response saying that was successful, you can send another request to Marketo to remove them from the list. And then Marketo takes over again. And the next time you call into Marketo, you'll get all of the new people that have been added to that list. You could schedule a batch campaign. I don't know why, but you could. You could send a call to send a record through a campaign is requested trigger. Again, don't see this being used particularly often, but you can do it. If you're not using the native sync between Salesforce and Dynamics, and you have opportunity data stored somewhere in your data warehouse, you could actually use the opportunity table in Marketo and start syncing opportunities with Marketo to have that one-to-many relationship with your leads. Assets, you could create an email, clone an email, update it, approve it. Same with templates, landing pages, all of those sorts of things. You could clone an entire program template that you've created and set the tokens that you want for that program. So the Adobe Workfront Fusion integration, if anyone knows what that is, that's the kind of thing that it can do. If you've kind of got your workflow management tool, that's, you're filling out your brief, all of your content going in there. The integration basically clones your program in Marketo and passes through all the things that you filled out in your brief, my from email, my from name, my subject line. It uses the API to then update all of that information, and you didn't have to spend 20 minutes or an hour or however long it takes you sort of cloning that program and filling all of that in yourself. So the opportunities are kind of endless, I guess. Do you need to automate all of these things? Probably not. But especially things like approvals, because I would probably prefer that a human is going to be approving an email and scheduling a campaign. But I guess what I want to get across is the more that you understand the different endpoints that exist and what they can do, the more you'll kind of understand some of those pre-built connections that you might have in your instance or other things that might be going on that you just sort of think are magically happening in your Marketo instance. A few gotchas, tips from me, sorry, I'm really going over time here. Defining the right lookup is really, really important. So if you're planning an integration, you have to define how you're going to match your records. Like I said earlier, people who share email addresses, you don't want to match an email address. You want to use an ID that's unique to your customers. If you're seeing duplicates in your instance and you have sort of an API integration, shocker that you've got that happening, but it could be that maybe you created a record through a list import and you didn't have that unique ID. And then your integration comes along and looks for that unique ID and it can't find it, so it updates a record. So you need to know what's going on in your instance and plan that carefully so that you can avoid that happening, right? So if you've got something that is unique to your customers, you need to make sure that all of your records that you're going to be updating through the API have that ID and that you don't have duplicates. So if you're going to use customer ID and you've got duplicates of those IDs in Marketo, you're going to have problems. If you're going to use email address as the unique identifier for your integration and you have duplicates in Marketo, you're going to have problems. One thing to mention that really catches people out is that when you're sending empty values in your bulk import file or whichever request you're making to Marketo that are empty, it will actually null any of the data that you have in Marketo. That's where it works very differently to a list import, where it would just simply ignore the existing value. But otherwise, know the limits and best practices. Well, you don't really need to know them. I'll give you a link to the document that you can send to your developers, but it's good to always make sure that people are aware of the limits. The ones I mentioned mostly are that you have 50,000 API calls per day in your instance. You can purchase more, but typically that's what people have. And it is best practice to use the bulk and batch methods unless it's really necessary to use kind of more one-to-one things. So lastly, I'll leave you with a few kind of words. What's next for you as a Marketo admin or power user? Find out if you have any integrations. If you don't know, ask the questions. You should want to know what's going on in your instance, and knowing your data and getting the right data into your instance is really crucial for making the most of Marketo as a tool. You can check out the admin settings if you're not sure. Just go admin, web services, and you'll actually see if there's been any requests made. If you don't know, that's where to find out. Make friends with your tech team and your developers. Ask them a million questions. They should know if they've built the integration or your third party or whoever it is, what endpoints are you using? What fields are you mapping? What data is being pushed in or pulled out of Marketo, and how often is that happening? Get familiar with the documentation. So the next slide has a bunch of links, which I will obviously make sure that you all get. It's not that scary. Like, I don't understand some of the things in the documents still after all these years. But the more you look through, even just like the left-hand navigation, you'll be able to see the different endpoints that are available. It'll start to give you a sense of what could I be doing. But ultimately, you also need to know where the documents are so that you can give them to your dev team, your IT team, your partners, for being able to set these sorts of things up. Also, just kind of getting familiar, it'll build your confidence to have these sorts of conversations with technical people. It's how I started learning about these things. It's a really, really good tool. The Marketo documents are actually incredible compared to other platforms. So lastly, well, last 2 points, just think about what you really want from your integration or what more you would want. If you don't already have one, have one. If you do already have one, my goodness, it's past 5:30. And document. So whatever you find out from your tech team or whoever it is that's built your integrations, document it in a lot of detail. Extract your schema from Marketo and build a mapping document. If you don't know what fields are coming in, find out and build yourself a document so that you always know what fields are being updated, what's your lookup field, and that'll really help you when it comes to sort of troubleshooting or figuring out when something's gone wrong. Was it a mapped field, or I have duplicates? Is it because we tried to, upload a bunch of duplicates in our instance, or did we use the wrong lookup key? What is that? So, sorry, I'm rushing now because I feel like we're very over time, but that's pretty much it from me. A few links there that you'll be able to access when we send this out. But if you have any questions, please yell out. Sorry for taking longer than I expected.
I don't have a question, but I have something to say just from an Adobe standpoint.
Yeah.
If you do have a project where you don't necessarily require
an ongoing additional API limit per day, we can do a temporary increase for you guys. So it's 100K calls per day for 2 weeks maximum. So all you need to do is
Good to
raise
know.
a support case there, request it, I should say. It's not always that it gets approved, but it's pretty likely it'll get approved. It's just when you're doing a bulk extract API one, that isn't a request. That one we can increase the limit for you, but support wouldn't be able to do that. Your account manager would support you there. So feel free to let us know if you.
Thanks.
You wanna repeat that for
If anyone didn't hear that online, so that was Bella from Adobe. If you need sort of a temporary increase to your API limit, which is currently 50,000 calls per day, you can actually request that for, do you say 2 weeks?
For 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks through support. So if there's something that you need to do like more as a once-off and not as ongoing, then definitely
100,000.
up to, to increase from 50,000 to 100,000. So good to remember. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There you go. Jasmine, question.
Hey, Helen.
Hello.
I can already think of some use cases.
Yes.
Taking me through that for the export APIs. Thank you.
No worries.
Inspired me. I was going to ask you a question around the error handling. Like,
Yeah.
you were kind of recommending you talk to tech teams around like error handling. So, for example, like I know sometimes we face some issues like where the maybe calls don't make it. There's a break in the integration, connection issues and things like that. I don't really have much visibility of like what's available. Do you know much about how to understand what error handling is available based on like what the team are using to make API calls?
Yeah, good question. So just to summarize, the question from in the room was about error handling, and if I can kind of explain or give more understanding of what is available, because Jasmine, who asked the question, doesn't get much visibility over what her tech team are doing in that regard. So I'm trying to think of the best way to answer this. So there are, in your Marketo UI, you don't really get much information if something is going wrong. If it's going right, you get no information really in your Marketo instance, other than the fact that your records are being added and updated. But you might see in your notification section that you get API errors. It just gives you a code. Even when you look up that code in the documents, it still doesn't give you a lot of information on what's happening. So when it comes to building these integrations to the API, you actually need to have processes in place to send additional API calls, I guess, into your instance to find out more information about what went wrong. So with the bulk import, for example, the response you'll get will say successful, or it'll kind of give you a summary that there was this many rows were in, updated and there were some failures. It doesn't give you any more than that. So you actually have to make another request into Marketo to get the failures. So there's endpoints for that to say get failed rows. And then you can pull that information out of Marketo to get a little bit more detail. So it'll depend on what it is you're trying to do, but usually as part of your integration, you actually need to what's called poll the job for more information about what's going wrong. And then, pull that out of Marketo to analyze it further. It's in the documentation. So if you were looking at the documentation about like the bulk import again, for example, it'll have, and also the best practices document, which I have linked here. It'll say it's best practice to poll your job every so often to see how it's tracking and, confirm when it's done. And it also has information about the endpoints for getting those failures as well.
Amazing.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Anything to add there, Jay?
Yeah, but we're out of time, so
Yeah,
I'll
all good.
talk to you later.
Yeah, all right. Thank you everyone who stayed with us online, if you're still there. All right, well, that sort of wraps up our mug. We'll get the recording out soon and any documents for people in the room. Stick around, but thank you. See you all soon.
Did we have any questions?
No.
Cool. Thanks, guys. There's still heaps of drinks.
Yes.